David Ross pressed his palm against the cold wall of his cell and wondered if anyone back home even knew he was missing. 3 months had passed since the patrol ship surrounded his research vessel. 3 months since everything went wrong. The cell was strange. The walls looked like frozen water but felt warm to the touch. They glowed with a soft blue light that never dimmed, never brightened. David had tried everything to mark time, but the light stayed constant. He counted his heartbeats instead. He did exercises. He recited every poem his mother had taught him as a child. Anything to stay sane. The aliens who captured him looked like walking mantises made of silver metal. At least that was how David's brain interpreted them. They never spoke to him directly. They communicated through a device that translated their clicking sounds into words he could understand. But the device only worked one way. When David tried to explain that his team had been peaceful explorers, that they had made a navigation error, no one listened. Other prisoners occupied cells along the curved corridor. David had seen them during his twice-daily walks to the waste facility. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some had too many limbs. Others seemed to be made of gas held together by force fields. One looked like a floating brain in a jar. But they all had one thing in common. They were terrified of David. When he walked past their cells, they retreated to the far corners. Some made sounds he assumed were prayers or curses. The guards kept their weapons pointed at him at all times, even though he had never shown any aggression. Even though he smiled and nodded politely whenever he saw them, David knew why they feared him. He had overheard enough conversations through the translation device. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Humans were considered apex predators from a nightmare planet where everything evolved to kill everything else. Never mind that David was a xenobiologist who had spent his career studying peaceful coexistence between species. Never mind that he had never hurt anyone in his entire life. To them, he was a monster. The cell door made a sound like breaking glass. David turned to see it dissolving into the wall. 3 guards stood outside, weapons raised. Behind them stood a taller figure wearing robes that shifted colors like oil on water. Prisoner David Ross of Earth, the translation device announced. You will come with us. David raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. Where are we going? The robed figure stepped forward. David noticed its face was covered by a smooth mask with no features except 2 dark spots where eyes might be. I am Magistrate Scylla of the Council of Allied Worlds. You will face the assessment. What kind of assessment? David asked, keeping his voice calm and friendly. He had learned that showing fear or anger only made things worse. The kind that determines whether your species deserves to exist, Scylla replied. The translation device somehow captured a tone of cold indifference. The guards motioned with their weapons for David to follow. He walked between them down corridors that twisted in ways that hurt his eyes. The geometry seemed wrong somehow, as if the ship existed in more dimensions than 3. Other aliens stopped to stare as the group passed. Some pointed. Others fled. They entered a large circular chamber that reminded David of a gladiator arena from ancient Rome. The floor was dark and smooth. High above, observation decks wrapped around the walls, already filled with dozens of different species. All of them were watching, waiting. What is this place? David asked. Scylla gestured to the center of the arena. This is where we separate the dangerous from the salvageable, where we determine if a species can be reasoned with or must be eliminated. David's heart pounded faster, but he kept his breathing steady. I'm a scientist. I study how different species communicate and live together. Please just give me a chance to explain. You will have your chance, Scylla said, if you survive. The guards retreated, leaving David alone in the center of the arena. Above him, the observation decks filled with more spectators. He heard sounds through the translation device. Excitement, anticipation, bloodlust. A door on the opposite side of the arena began to open. It rose slowly, revealing darkness beyond. David heard something breathing in that darkness. Something large. One of the guards near Scylla spoke in a trembling voice. Magistrate, are you certain? The last 3 subjects died within seconds. The creature has not fed in 2 cycles. It will be especially aggressive. That is precisely why we use it, Scylla replied. The Nightmaw breaks even the strongest warriors. If this human can face it without losing his mind, perhaps their species has potential. If not, we will know they are too weak to join the galactic community. The breathing from the dark doorway grew louder. David saw movement in the shadows. Something massive. something that reflected no light as if it absorbed illumination itself. "What have you done to that creature?" David asked, his xenobiologist instincts overriding his fear. "What is it?" "It is fear given form," Scylla said. "Designed by our finest geneticists. It feeds on terror itself. Every species in the known galaxy has faced it during assessment. Most do not survive. Those who do are never the same." The creature stepped into the light. David had studied predators his entire life. Earth had produced millions of years of evolution creating perfect killing machines. He had worked with tigers, crocodiles, and great white sharks. He had studied pack hunters and ambush predators. He thought he understood what made something dangerous. He was wrong. The Nightmaw defied description. Its body seemed to shift between solid and shadow. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed across its surface in angry reds and purples. It had too many limbs, or perhaps too few, depending on which angle David viewed it from. Eyes opened and closed across its body like wounds. Its mouth contained rows of teeth that curved inward, designed to trap rather than tear. But what struck David most was the sound it made. Not a roar, not a growl, a cry that resonated in his chest and made his bones ache. A sound of pain and confusion and desperate hunger. The Nightmaw fixed its attention on David and began to move forward. Every instinct David possessed screamed at him to run. His body wanted to flee, to fight, to do anything except stand still while this nightmare creature approached. His hands shook. Sweat ran down his back. His vision narrowed to a tunnel focused entirely on the Nightmaw. But David had spent 15 years studying animal behavior. He had learned to read body language across hundreds of species. He had survived close encounters with Earth's most dangerous predators by understanding one simple truth. Fear makes everything worse. The Nightmaw circled him slowly, its form rippling like water disturbed by wind. The bioluminescent patterns across its body pulsed faster now, shifting from purple to crimson. David forced himself to look past the terror and observe the creature with his scientist's mind. The way it moved told him something important. Its steps were uneven, hesitant. The patterns on its body were not just threats, they were communication. And those sounds it made, those bone-deep cries, they were not hunting calls. They were distress signals. David had heard similar sounds before. A wolf separated from its pack, an elephant mourning its dead, a dolphin trapped in a net. This creature was not preparing to attack. It was suffering. He lowered himself to the ground, crossing his legs and placing his hands in his lap. The movement made the spectators in the observation decks gasp. Several guards moved toward their weapons, but David ignored them. He focused entirely on the Nightmaw. "Easy," he said softly, keeping his voice low and steady. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I won't hurt you." The Nightmaw stopped moving. Its many eyes blinked in sequence across its body. The creature tilted what David assumed was its head, studying him from multiple angles simultaneously. David continued speaking in the same calm tone. "You're hungry, aren't you? They haven't been feeding you properly, not the right food anyway." He thought about what Scylla had said. The creature feeds on terror. But what happened when there was no terror to feed on? What happened to a predator, specifically designed to consume fear when its prey felt no fear? It would starve, just like any other animal denied its natural food source. The Nightmaw moved closer. David could feel heat radiating from its body, could smell something like ozone and burnt metal. Every part of his survival instinct begged him to move, to defend himself, to show some kind of reaction. Instead, he began to breathe in a slow, measured rhythm. In through his nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out through his mouth for 4 counts. It was a technique his mother had taught him when he was afraid of thunderstorms as a child. The Nightmaw's bioluminescent patterns began to slow. The angry reds softened to oranges. Its movements became less aggressive, more curious. It extended something that might have been a limb or a sensory organ toward David's face. In the observation decks above, Magistrate Scylla leaned forward. "This is impossible," the magistrate whispered. "No species has ever survived this long without showing fear response. The human should be dead, or insane by now." One of the council members, a being that resembled a floating crystal formation, spoke through the translation system. Perhaps the scans were wrong. Perhaps humans cannot feel fear. They feel fear, another council member replied, this one looking like a bundle of vines with flowers for eyes. Look at his biological readings. His heart rate is elevated. His stress hormones are flooding his system. He is absolutely terrified. Then why does he not run? The crystal being asked. Scylla had no answer. Down in the arena, David watched the Nightmaw's sensory organ hover inches from his face. He could see smaller patterns within the larger patterns on its surface, fractals of light that reminded him of neurons firing in a brain scan. You're intelligent, aren't you? David said quietly. Not just a weapon, not just a monster. You're aware. You understand what's happening to you. The Nightmaw made a different sound now, softer, almost like a question. David slowly raised one hand, moving with deliberate care. He kept his palm open and relaxed. I'm going to touch you now. Is that okay? The creature did not retreat. If anything, it leaned slightly closer. David's hand made contact with the Nightmaw's surface. It felt like touching a living shadow, warm and smooth but somehow insubstantial. The bioluminescent patterns beneath his palm shifted from orange to yellow to a soft, gentle blue. There you are, David whispered. You're not so scary after all, are you? You're just lonely, isolated. They created you to be a weapon and never thought about what you might need. The Nightmaw settled onto the arena floor with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Its body compressed, becoming more solid and defined. David could now see. It had 6 limbs folded beneath it and a long tail that wrapped around its body. The eyes that had been scattered across its form closed one by one, until only 2 remained, positioned where David would expect a predator's eyes to be. It looked almost peaceful. David began to hum a melody his mother used to sing to him. A simple tune without words, just a series of notes that rose and fell in a comforting pattern. The Nightmaw's breathing slowed. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed in time with the melody. Impossible, Scylla said again, standing now and gripping the railing of the observation deck. The Nightmaw has killed warriors, scholars, and diplomats from 100 worlds. It broke a Thraxian war chief in 30 seconds. It drove an entire delegation of mind readers to madness with their own reflected fear. How is this human doing this? The guard stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. David continued humming, his hand still resting on the Nightmaw's surface. The creature shifted its massive bulk and laid its head near David's leg, not touching him, but close enough to feel his presence. Within minutes, the Nightmaw's eyes closed. Its breathing became deep and rhythmic. The bioluminescent patterns faded to a soft, steady blue glow. The creature was asleep. David sat in silence, afraid to move and wake it. His legs were going numb from sitting cross-legged. His hand was tired from holding the same position. But none of that mattered. He had just made first contact with an alien species in the most unlikely way possible. And despite everything, despite the fear and danger and confusion, he felt something he had not felt since his capture. Hope. The observation decks erupted in chaos. Council members from dozens of species shouted over each other, their translation devices creating a cacophony of confused voices. Some demanded that guards storm the arena immediately. Others insisted on studying what had just happened. A few simply stared in shocked silence. Magistrate Scylla raised one robed arm and the chamber fell quiet. Explain yourself, human. David looked up at the observation decks, careful not to disturb the sleeping Nightmaw. It's not complicated. The creature was in distress. I responded with calmness instead of fear. That's all? That's all? A council member who resembled a floating jellyfish pulsed with agitation. You have somehow disabled our most effective security measure. You have corrupted the Nightmaw's programming. I didn't corrupt anything, David replied, keeping his voice steady. I just treated it like a living being instead of a weapon. Another council member spoke, this one looking like an upright lizard covered in iridescent scales. The Nightmaw is a living weapon. It was genetically designed to embody fear, It has no other purpose. David felt anger building in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting emotional would not help. With respect, that's exactly the problem. You created a sentient being and gave it only one function. You made it dependent on an emotion as its food source, then put it in situations where it would be surrounded by terror. Did anyone stop to think about what that might do to an intelligent creature? The observation decks fell silent again. David continued, his years of research pouring into his words. This creature is suffering from severe psychological trauma. It's been isolated, probably since its creation. It's been exposed to constant fear and violence without any positive social interaction. You've essentially tortured it into becoming the monster you wanted it to be. Scylla's mask tilted slightly. You determined all of this in mere minutes? I study animal behavior for a living, David said. Or I did before you captured me. Back on Earth, we learned that even the most dangerous predators have complex emotional and social needs. Ignore those needs and you get unstable, unpredictable behavior. Give them what they need and you can coexist peacefully. Earth, the lizard-like council member hissed. A death world where your species evolved alongside thousands of apex predators, where everything fights for survival every moment. You speak of coexistence, but your planet is defined by violence. David shook his head. You're only seeing half the picture. Yes, Earth is dangerous. Yes, we evolved to survive in harsh conditions, but that's exactly why we learned to cooperate, why we developed empathy and social bonds. A human alone in the wilderness dies quickly. Humans working together can thrive anywhere. He gestured to the nightmaw sleeping peacefully beside him. This creature is alone. It's been alone its entire existence. That's worse than any physical hunger. Scylla descended from the observation deck, approaching the arena floor with several guards. The nightmaw's eyes opened slightly and its body tensed. David placed his hand back on its surface and hummed softly. The creature relaxed again, though it watched Scylla carefully. You claim you can help it? Scylla asked. I can try, David replied. But I need information. How was it created? What has its life been like? What does it actually need to survive? One of the guards, a being that looked like Livingstone, spoke through the translation device. The Nightmaw was designed by the Bioweapons Division 15 cycles ago. It is fed a synthetic compound that mimics the chemical composition of fear hormones. It has been used in 37 assessments. All previous subjects either died or went insane. Has anyone ever tried to socialize it? David asked. Give it positive experiences? Teach it anything beyond hunting and intimidation? The silence that followed was answer enough. David sighed. That's what I thought. Look, I'm not claiming to be some kind of miracle worker, but back home we've rehabilitated traumatized animals for centuries, creatures that were aggressive, isolated, or dangerous. With patience and proper care, most of them recovered. Some even became gentle. This is not some earth beast, the crystal-like council member interjected from above. This is a weapon designed at the molecular level to be fearsome. You cannot simply train it like a pet. Every living thing can learn, David countered. Every sentient being responds to kindness. You designed it to be intelligent enough to hunt and terrify. That same intelligence means it can form bonds and experience emotions beyond hunger. Scylla stood silent for a long moment, the mask revealing nothing of the magistrate's thoughts. Finally, Scylla spoke. The council will deliberate on this matter. In the meantime, you will remain in the arena with the Nightmaw. Wait, David said quickly. If I'm staying here, I need some things. Food and water, obviously, but also enrichment materials. Toys, basically. Objects with different textures, colors, and sounds. And I need access to any research data you have on the Nightmaw's biology and behavior. You make demands as a prisoner? The jellyfish-like council member asked incredulously. I make requests as someone trying to help, David replied. You wanted to assess whether humans are worthy of joining your galactic community. Well, this is what we do. We learn, we adapt. We find ways to connect with other species, even the dangerous ones. Especially the dangerous ones, Scylla nodded slowly. Your requests will be considered. Guards establish a perimeter but do not approach the Nightmaw unless it becomes aggressive. Bring the human basic supplies. As the guards moved to comply, David felt the Nightmaw shift beside him. The creature had fully woken now, its eyes tracking every movement in the arena. When a guard got too close, the Nightmaw's bioluminescent patterns flared red and it released a low, threatening sound. The guard jumped back, weapon raised. Stop, David said firmly, placing both hands on the Nightmaw. Nobody move. You're scaring it. We are scaring it, the guard said, voice high with stress. Yes, David replied. It's protecting me because it views me as part of its space now. Just stay back and move slowly. Let it see that you're not a threat. The guards retreated to a safe distance. David felt the Nightmaw's body relax again under his hands. Its patterns shifted back to calm blues and greens. Good, David whispered to the creature. You're doing great. I know this is all strange and frightening, but I promise I'm going to help you. We're going to figure this out together. The Nightmaw made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. Yes, David said, smiling despite everything. Together. 7 days passed in the arena, though David had to guess at the time. His internal clock was completely disrupted by the constant artificial lighting and irregular sleep schedule. The Nightmaw did not sleep on any normal cycle, so David dozed when the creature rested and stayed alert when it was active. The guards had brought him supplies as promised. Basic food that tasted like cardboard soaked in chemicals, but it kept him alive. Water that was slightly too thick but drinkable. And most importantly, the research data on the Nightmaw and various objects David had requested. The data had been disturbing to read. The Nightmaw was not born but grown in an artificial womb over a period of 3 cycles. Its genetic material came from samples collected from apex predators across 12 different worlds. The scientists had combined the most fear-inducing traits from each species, then added bioluminescent genes for visual impact and sensory organs tuned to detect the chemical signatures of terror. They had created the perfect instrument of psychological warfare, but they had never considered what kind of mind might develop inside such a creature. David spent hours observing the Nightmaw's behavior patterns. He noticed it responded positively to certain sounds, particularly low-frequency vibrations. It enjoyed textures, spending long periods rubbing against the various objects David had arranged around the arena. Smooth stones, rough fabric, metal bars that rang when struck. The creature was curious, playful even. On the 3rd day, David discovered the Nightmaw could change its size, not dramatically but enough to compress its body to about half its normal dimensions. When David sat down to rest, the creature would shrink and settle beside him like an enormous cat seeking warmth. On the 5th day, he noticed patterns in the Nightmaw's bioluminescent displays. They were not random. The creature was trying to communicate. David started cataloging the patterns. Blue waves meant contentment. Green spirals indicated curiosity. Red flashes signaled alarm or aggression. Yellow pulses seemed to be questions. By the 6th day, David was having simple conversations with the creature using a combination of sounds, gestures, and color responses. Are you hungry? David would ask, and the Nightmaw would flash yellow if yes, blue if no. Do you like this object? David would hold up one of the toys, and the creature would respond with green spirals or red flashes depending on its interest. It was primitive communication, but it was communication nonetheless. The observation decks remained occupied at all times. Different council members rotated through, watching David's every interaction with the Nightmaw. He could feel their eyes on him constantly, judging and analyzing. Some seemed curious. Others remained hostile. All of them were waiting to see if he would fail. On the 7th day, Magistrate Scylla returned to the arena floor with a full delegation of council members. David Ross of Earth, Scylla announced formally. The council has reached a decision regarding your proposal. David stood up and the Nightmaw immediately moved beside him. Its body pressed gently against his leg, not aggressive but clearly protective. Several council members stepped back involuntarily. The creature has bonded with you, observed the lizard-like council member. This was not supposed to be possible. All social creatures can form bonds, David replied. You just have to give them a reason to trust you. Scylla gestured to the arena around them. In 7 days you have accomplished what our researchers said could not be done. The Nightmaw responds to your commands. It displays emotional states beyond aggression and hunger. It has not attempted to harm you even once. It never wanted to harm anyone, David said quietly. It was just scared and alone and doing what it was designed to do. Just like any other animal trying to survive. Another council member spoke, this one resembling a cloud of glowing particles held together in a vaguely humanoid shape. Your methods have been recorded and analyzed. Our xenopsychologists are reviewing the data. If your techniques can be replicated, it would revolutionize how we approach dangerous species. David shook his head. It's not about techniques. It's about respect. About recognizing that intelligence and emotion exist in forms We might not immediately understand. Every species you've assessed with the night maw probably would have responded the same way I did if you'd given them a chance instead of immediately throwing them into a death match. The observation decks murmured at this. Translation devices creating a buzz of conflicting reactions. Scylla raised a hand for silence. Perhaps, but you are the first to demonstrate this approach successfully. Which brings us to our decision. The Council has voted to establish diplomatic contact with Earth. Preliminary negotiations will begin within the next lunar cycle. David felt relief wash over him so intensely that his knees nearly buckled. Thank you. That's all I wanted. A chance for dialogue instead of conflict. However, Scylla continued, there are conditions. You, David Ross, will serve as humanity's first liaison to the Council. You will remain here, teaching our handlers how to properly care for the night maw and assisting with the rehabilitation of other potentially dangerous species in our custody. What? David blinked in surprise. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a scientist. You are the bridge between your species and ours, the Particle Cloud Council member said. You have proven that humans possess unique capabilities for interspecies communication, skills that could benefit the entire galactic community. David looked down at the night maw, which gazed back at him with its large, trusting eyes. The creature's patterns pulsed in soft blues and greens, content, happy even. He thought about Earth, about his colleagues and friends who were probably searching for him, about his small apartment in Seattle with its view of the water, about his mother's Sunday dinners and the familiar comfort of home. Then he thought about what he had accomplished here, about the creature that everyone had called a monster now resting peacefully against his side, about the opportunity to prevent other species from suffering the same isolation and trauma, about the chance to show the galaxy that humans were more than just survivors from a death world. I have one condition, David said finally. I want regular communication with Earth. I want to share what I've learned with my colleagues. And I want assurance that the night maw will be treated properly, with dignity and care regardless of whether I'm here or not. Scylla nodded. Those terms are acceptable. Do you agree to serve as humanity's liaison? David took a deep breath. This was not the life he had planned, not the career he had imagined, but sometimes the most important work came from unexpected places. Yes, he said, I agree. The night maw made a happy chirping sound and its entire body glowed with warm golden light. The arena was transformed over the following weeks into something between a habitat and a research facility. The Council provided David with proper equipment, a small living space attached to the main chamber, and most importantly, access to the other creatures that had been deemed too dangerous for normal containment. David's first morning in his new role began with a visit from 3 alien scientists. They introduced themselves through translation devices as specialists in xenobiology, behavioral psychology, and genetic engineering. The geneticist, a being that looked like a walking crystal prism, seemed particularly interested in David's methods. I do not understand, the crystal scientist said, projecting rainbow patterns across the walls as it spoke. You use no technology, no chemical suppressants, no neural dampeners. How do you control the night maw? David was sitting with the night maw in the center of the habitat, running his hand along its surface while it purred like a massive engine. I don't control it. Control implies force. I communicate with it. I respect its boundaries. I make sure its needs are met. But it is a weapon, the psychologist interjected. This one resembled a bundle of tentacles with a central eye. It was designed to intimidate and harm. It was designed by people who didn't consider the consequences of creating sentient life for a single purpose, David replied, not hiding the edge in his voice. Just because something can be dangerous doesn't mean it wants to be. He stood up and walked to a storage unit where the guards had placed the objects he requested. He pulled out several items and brought them back to the night maw. A puzzle box that required manipulating shapes to open. A ball made of different textured materials. A series of containers filled with scents from various worlds. Watch, David said. He showed the night maw the puzzle box. The creature's eyes focused on it with immediate interest. Its bioluminescent patterns shifted to curious greens and yellows. Using several of its limbs, the night maw began manipulating the shapes, testing different combinations. It is problem-solving, the crystal scientist said with what sounded like amazement. Of course it is, David replied. It's intelligent. It was always intelligent. You just never gave it anything to do except terrify people. The Nightmaw solved the puzzle, and the box opened to reveal treats David had prepared. Compressed nutrient blocks infused with the synthetic fear compound, but mixed with other flavors and textures. The creature ate them happily, its patterns glowing with satisfaction. "You are teaching it," the psychologist observed. "Positive reinforcement for desired behaviors." "I'm enriching its environment," David corrected. "Same thing we do for intelligent animals back on Earth. Puzzles, games, new experiences. Without mental stimulation, even the gentlest creature can become depressed or aggressive." Over the next hour, David demonstrated various activities he had developed with the Nightmaw. Hide-and-seek games that exercised its hunting instincts in a playful context, scent identification exercises, even a form of fetch where the creature would retrieve specific objects based on color patterns David would display. The three scientists took extensive notes. They asked hundreds of questions. David answered patiently, explaining each technique and the reasoning behind it. "What about the other dangerous species in containment?" The tentacled psychologist finally asked. "Can these methods work with them as well?" David had been waiting for this question. "Maybe, probably, but I need to understand each species first. What are their natural behaviors? What are their needs? What trauma have they experienced? Every creature is different." The crystal scientist made a sound like wind chimes. "We have 7 Class A threat entities currently in isolation. They have defeated all attempts at communication or rehabilitation. Most are scheduled for termination." "Take me to them," David said immediately. "Let me try." The first creature they showed him was called a render. It looked like a mass of bladed limbs surrounding a central core, constantly spinning and cutting anything that came within reach. It was kept in a containment field that prevented physical movement, but allowed it to rotate slowly. David studied it for 20 minutes in silence. Then he asked, "What planet is it from?" "A world with extreme gravitational variation," the psychologist replied. "The environment shifts between crushing pressure and near-zero gravity multiple times per day cycle. So it evolved to move and defend itself in constantly changing conditions," David thought aloud. "Its spinning is probably a stabilization mechanism, and those blades might be sensory organs as much as weapons." He turned to the scientists. "It's not aggressive. It's defensive. It's trapped in a stable environment with no way to orient itself properly." "Of course it's lashing out. How can you know this?" the crystal scientist asked. "Because I'm looking at what it does, not what I'm afraid it might do," David answered. "Give me time with it. Let me design an environment that mimics its homeworld's conditions. I bet it calms down immediately." The second creature was even more challenging. It existed partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. Looking at it too long made David's eyes hurt and his head spin. The scientists called it a phase ripper. "This one killed 3 handlers before we managed to contain it," the psychologist said gravely. "It does not respond to any stimuli. It simply attacks anything that enters its containment area." David watched the creature flicker in and out of visibility. "Does it eat?" "We do not know. It refuses all food we offer." "Has anyone tried offering it energy instead of matter?" David asked. "If it exists in multiple dimensions, its nutritional needs might be completely different from what we're used to." The scientists looked at each other. No one had considered that possibility. Over the next several days, David worked with each of the 7 supposedly irredeemable creatures. He studied their behaviors. He researched their home worlds. He developed theories about their needs and tested them carefully. The render responded exactly as David predicted. When given a habitat with variable gravity, it stopped its aggressive spinning and actually seemed to dance, moving gracefully through the different gravity zones. The phase ripper began accepting electromagnetic energy feeds. Once properly nourished, it became docile and even curious about its surroundings. One by one, the impossible cases became success stories. And with each success, David's reputation grew. Council members visited regularly to observe his work. Other species sent representatives to learn his methods, but through it all, David never forgot the Nightmaw. Every evening, he returned to the main habitat to spend time with the creature that had started everything. They would sit together in comfortable silence, or David would teach it new games, or they would simply rest while David told stories about Earth. The Nightmaw's bioluminescent patterns had developed incredible complexity. It could now express dozens of different emotions and ideas. It had even started creating artistic patterns just for the pleasure of making something beautiful. "You know what's funny?" David said one night, lying against the Nightmaw's warm bulk and staring at the ceiling. "They brought me here to prove humanity was too dangerous to join the galactic community. Instead, I think I proved we might be exactly what this community needs. Someone who understands that danger and beauty can exist in the same creature. That fear and love are not opposites, but neighbors." The Nightmaw pulsed with soft blue agreement and wrapped a protective limb around David's shoulders. Outside the habitat, in the observation decks, Magistrate Scylla watched with what might have been satisfaction. 6 months after David first entered the arena, the council convened for a historic vote. Representatives from 300 species gathered in the Grand Assembly Chamber, a space so vast that artificial gravity platforms were needed to accommodate species with different environmental requirements. David stood in the center of it all, wearing clothes provided by the council that were meant to look formal, but felt awkward on his human frame. Beside him, calm and massive, waited the Nightmaw. The creature had insisted on coming, and David had learned not to argue when it made its wishes known through their shared communication system. Magistrate Scylla addressed the assembly. "We gather to determine the fate of humanity, to decide whether the species from Earth, classified as a Class 12 death world, should be welcomed into the Council of Allied Worlds or marked as a permanent threat." The chamber erupted in discussion. David could see the translation devices working overtime, projecting arguments in hundreds of languages simultaneously. A council member David recognized as a military representative stood. This one resembled an armored insect the size of a human. "I speak against admission. Humans are apex predators. Their world produces the galaxy's most dangerous fauna. They have no place among civilized species." Another member countered, "A being of pure energy contained in a crystalline structure. Yet their representative has accomplished what none of our experts could. He has rehabilitated 7 creatures we deemed beyond saving. He has demonstrated empathy and intelligence." "One human," the insect warrior replied. "One exception does not define a species." David felt the Nightmaw tense beside him. Its patterns flickered between blue and red, uncertain and protective. David placed a hand on its surface and sent calming thoughts through their connection. The creature relaxed slightly. Scylla gestured for silence. "David Ross of Earth, you have been granted the opportunity to speak on behalf of your species. The council will hear your testimony." David stepped forward, his heart pounding. He had prepared a speech, practiced it dozens of times, but standing before hundreds of alien species, all of them judging whether humanity deserved to exist on the galactic stage, all his prepared words seemed inadequate. So he spoke from his heart instead. "You're right to be afraid of us," he began, and the chamber went silent. "Earth is brutal. We evolved fighting for every meal, every shelter, every moment of survival. We're persistence hunters who can track prey for days. We're creative problem solvers who turned rocks into tools and tools into civilizations. We're social creatures who form bonds so strong we'll die for each other." He paused, looking around at the assembled species. "But that's not the whole story. Yes, we're from a death world. Yes, we're capable of violence. But we're also capable of love, compassion, and understanding. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We turned wildcats into companions. We learned to live alongside creatures that could kill us because we recognized their value as individuals, not just their danger as predators." The Nightmaw moved beside him, and David rested his hand on its surface again. "When you threw me in an arena with this creature, you expected me to fight or flee. You expected the Nightmaw to kill me, but that's because you saw us both as weapons, as threats. You forgot that we're also living beings capable of connection." He addressed the insect warrior directly. "You said one human doesn't define a species. You're absolutely right, but one human's actions can demonstrate what a species values. I value life, all life, even life that scares me, even life that could harm me, because I believe understanding is always better than destruction." Another council member stood, this one resembling a flowing mass of liquid metal. "Beautiful words. But words are easy. How do we know humans won't become conquerors? Your history is full of wars and violence." "You're right again," David acknowledged. "We have a violent history. We've fought each other over resources, territory, beliefs. We've made terrible mistakes, but we've also learned from them. We've developed philosophies of peace. We've created art and music and literature that celebrates connection over conflict. We've sent messages into space hoping to make friends, not enemies. He felt emotion building in his voice but didn't try to hide it. Every species in this chamber probably has a dark history. Violence is part of survival. But so is cooperation. So is empathy. You can choose to define us by our worst moments, or you can give us a chance to show you our best. The night maw made a sound then, a deep, resonant tone that filled the chamber. Its bioluminescent patterns exploded in a cascade of colors. Blues and greens and golds swirling together in a display more beautiful than anything David had ever seen it create. The chamber fell silent, watching the creature that had been their ultimate weapon now expressing something that looked like joy. The night maw was designed to be fear incarnate, David said softly, but given a chance, given kindness and patience, it became something else. Something better. That's what I'm asking for humanity. Not blind trust, not immediate acceptance. Just a chance to prove we can be better than your fears about us. Scylla stood. The Council will now vote. All in favor of establishing diplomatic relations with Earth and beginning the integration process for humanity into the Council of Allied Worlds. Signify in your species' traditional manner. Lights began appearing across the chamber. Different colors, different patterns, different methods of signaling agreement. David tried to count them, but lost track as more and more council members voted in favor. When the counting finished, Scylla announced the results. 212 in favor, 73 opposed, 15 abstaining. The motion passes. Humanity is granted provisional membership in the Council of Allied Worlds. David felt his knees go weak. The night maw caught him, supporting his weight with gentle pressure. He leaned against the creature and laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. Scylla approached them both. You have given us much to consider, David Ross. Not just about humanity, but about how we view all species we deem dangerous. Your work has started conversations that will change council policy for generations. I just did what felt right, David replied. Treated others the way I'd want to be treated. Looked for understanding before judgment. A simple philosophy, Scylla observed. But perhaps that is its strength. Later, after the formalities and celebrations and introductions to dozens of species who wanted to meet the human who befriended the night maw, David returned to his habitat. The creature followed as it always did. They settled in their usual spot, David leaning against the night maw's warm bulk, both of them exhausted but content. We did it, David whispered. We actually did it. The night maw pulsed with soft blue light. Contentment. Happiness. Home. David pulled out his communication device and composed a message to Earth. To his mother, his colleagues, everyone he'd left behind. The message was simple. I'm coming home soon, and I'm bringing friends. Outside the habitat, stars wheeled through the viewing port. Somewhere among them was a small blue planet where humans worried and hoped and dreamed of the stars. Soon, those humans would join the galactic community. They would bring their strength and their violence, yes, but also their compassion and their ability to see beauty in unexpected places. The night maw shifted in its sleep, and David smiled. 6 months ago, he had been a prisoner facing certain death. Now he was a bridge between worlds, proof that even the most unlikely friendships could change the course of history. He closed his eyes and let himself drift towards sleep, surrounded by warmth and bioluminescent patterns that painted dreams in colors beyond human description. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new species to understand, new bridges to build. But tonight he had everything he needed: peace, purpose, and a friend who had once been called a monster but was really just lonely, waiting for someone brave enough to see past the fear to the soul underneath. The galaxy, David thought as sleep finally claimed him, was going to be an interesting place.